Thank you everybody for joining today. Today we're going to cover reporting strategies and objectives. This is the third of our fundamentals webinar series, and we're hoping to get into some good information today. So this is the outline. This is what we'll be talking about today. We're going to start with objectives, the different reasons for running reports. The big question with KeyServer is you've got all this information being collected. How can you make use of it, and what can you expect to be able to pull out of the system, and what kind of insight and information can you glean from that? We're going to go over reporting basics in general, talk about Key Reporter versus Key Configure, the different things that you can do in both, and some of the things that are available in one or the other system. And then we'll dig into some specific hardware reports. Software reports is where we'll probably spend the most time in Key Configure, and then we'll take a look at some of the functionality in Key Reporter that overlaps with Key Configure, how you can run the same reports, different ways to access them, and then we'll look at some of the unique features that are only available within Key Reporter. And at that point, we will move on to the Q&A session at the end. So starting with reporting objectives. As I said, you've got information being recorded and logged by the KeyServer about all of the client machines out on the network. And what kind of information can you pull, and what exactly is going to happen when you run a report, and what are some of the reasons that you might have for doing so? One is just simple hardware discovery and usage, not just what machines are out there, but what are the machines' names, what are their locations, IP addresses, and the various hardware attributes, how much free disk space is out there, how many computers do I have that might be able to run a particular virtual reality system or are available for upgrading to a certain operating system that maybe has a higher level of hardware requirements. Usage reports related to hardware as well, login reports, what computers are being used most often, and how much time are users spending on those reports. This information can be helpful for determining where to focus resources in a hardware refresh, or if you are looking into resources being spent on hardware, are there places where you need more computers or fewer computers based on usage statistics? And then with software, there is discovery. First of all, we can run reports that show you what software is installed where, both at the raw program level and then also at the product level. And then beyond that, if you have policies set up for software, you can run reports that give you information about the way the software is being used in terms of management policies, observation policies, and you can even run reports to see how many denials of a software product have occurred. And then moving past simple usage, what about comparing that usage to your entitlements? Are you using more than you're entitled to use based on what you've purchased? And with our compliance reports, we have the ability to go even a step further and look at what kind of money that represents, the dollar figures related to your liability if you're going over, or your surplus if you are not using everything that you're entitled to, which tells you maybe how much more you should be spending on a product or how much you might be able to save if you were to reduce the amount. And then going back to our original intent here with running these fundamentals is that we know there are a lot of KeyServers out there that were originally purchased for managing concurrent use licenses, but maybe aren't being used so much anymore because there's less of that entitlement type out there. Well, as you move into these subscription-based entitlements, and there's a lot more ubiquitous installations, site licenses, everything is installed everywhere. Well, how do you negotiate with a vendor for a renewal now that you have this information, or once you're tracking usage and can run reports to say, well, we've got this site license, but we're actually only using the product on X number of computers in any significant manner. In particular, Adobe and Microsoft Office come to mind on that front. So we'll talk briefly about running reports that will at least allow you to bring them into those negotiations and those discussions as a data point with regards to whether you continue with the site license, how much you might pay for that site license based on usage. We'll talk about that, and that has to do with license optimizations and cost reduction, which is the last item here on this slide. Before we jump into reports, though, I want to quickly explain what the difference is within Key Reporter and Key Configure between a report and a window or some of the other things that you're seeing. When we talk about a report, we're talking about a process that runs on the data that usually will cross-reference two tables within the KeyServer and give you a static report that can be exported, saved as a different file type, and shared with others outside of the KeyServer. A window often will have almost the same exact information, and we'll talk about ways that you can use the options within Windows as an alternative to running a report by adding arranging columns, for example, within the different windows, using filters or tags to drill down within a window. The difference again between a report and a window: a report is something that you run on the data to get a static result, and a window is a view into the KeyServer itself with often live data, can easily and quickly be refreshed. Again, they appear very similar, but they functionally are quite different. And one more preliminary item here, the differences between Key Configure and Key Reporter within the KeyServer tool. The KeyServer is the server process that holds all the data. Key Configure is the administrative console that allows you to access that data. It gives you a view of that data. And then Key Reporter is a web interface that gives you information about that data or access to that data as well. Key Configure is where you go for policy configuration, adding accounts, integrating Active Directory. It's where most of your management setup and configuration is done. It's also where you can run almost all of the reports in the system, with the one exception being the dashboards or the widgets that are available in Key Reporter. Key Reporter also has lab maps, which we've talked about in a previous webinar and are available to everyone as well. And then there is one widget within Key Reporter that I did want to demonstrate because it's come up a couple of times recently in calls, and it's fairly useful. It allows you to run or give you a very quick access to a report that you might normally run in Key Configure, where you can either set it to a schedule or set this to generate that report. So we'll get to that as well. And something that both Key Configure and Key Reporter can do is you have the report builder that allows you to configure and customize the way you want the report to run, a scheduler that allows you to set a report to run at a repetitive or at certain intervals. So you can run it daily, you can run it weekly or monthly to have it available without having to go in and configure it each time. And then I will show you how to access the archive of previously run reports, both in Key Reporter as well as in Key Configure. So just looking at Key Reporter specifically, one thing that I wanted to bring up first is a quick look at the tables. We talk about reports as drawing on data within the tables, sometimes multiple tables. And so I just wanted you to see that there are a lot of tables. In general, we talk about the primary programs, products, computers, policies, users maybe. But if you come to this page, this is going to give you a full breakdown, not only of all the tables that are in your KeyServer database, but you can also see all the fields or columns within each table. You can select any table and get a view of all of the columns, and then some details about the data types and information about what each field is for. So Again, I just bring this up because this is a very comprehensive list of every place that you might be able to store data within your KeyServer and what the intention for each field is. And then from there, when we talk about reporting on this data, you have a better idea of where we're coming from. So that's the tables. One of the biggest question that comes up, in particular with new users, is what are the report names? So we're going to go through what each of the acronyms mean within the reports tool, and we'll talk about how to make decisions about which reports you want to run. A big goal here is to walk you through, in my experience here for the last few months, what seem to be the most common or most useful reports that users run regularly. We'll talk about the ways that you can access and run reports. It's not just from the reports menu up at the top. You have the ability to right-click on individual selections on the windows themselves. And within Key Configure specifically, you can actually use the results of one report as a starting point for another report. Within a given report, you can also do some reporting acrobatics here, which is flipping the view, customizing the arrangement, or adding additional columns to the report. So we'll look at that. Report parameters in the report builder, and we'll talk briefly about time sets. In addition to a duration or a time frame this week, this month, last year that you might run a report on, you can further restrict the time frame of a report using time sets. And I'll show you where that's done. And exporting reports. This is another common one, in particular if you want to share it with a user who doesn't have Key Configure installed, or import it into another tool. Tableau, we have a client who I actually wrote a case study on recently, who's got a complete dashboard set up in Atlassian Jira, where he's got ODBC exports imported into that allow him to add additional information and do some hardware and software management at another level within an external tool. But most of the data actually comes into that system from KeyServer. So the main place that you probably know that you can discover and run reports from is up top here. And this is where we'll talk about the different acronyms just because they're easy to access here. Anything that says COMP is computer. And then many of these are obvious. That's a program. So this report is going to show us a list of computers and then all of the programs on each computer. And computer by serial number. Path by program is going to show us the installation path for each program that has been discovered or audited on whatever selection of computers we might make. And then you'll see that these are mostly repetitive acronyms here. Computer by program for a baseline audit. This is the original audit, the first audit that was done on a computer. Audit products. So the difference between a program and a product we've talked about recently. The programs are the raw executable files. The products are the suites or more entitlement based. How does the software publisher actually sell the software? That's what a product is. Product determination happens locally on your KeyServer based on the products that have been imported here in the products window. So auditing products is a useful approach to knowing exactly what entitlements you might have installed and where. Hot fixes. So this is a hardware-based report that will actually show you all of the hot fixes for the operating system that have been installed on a given computer. And if we just run that very quickly here, demonstrate. This has come up a few times. It's good when you're investigating security issues. You want to make sure your computers are up to date. You can run this report and get a quick look at what operating system updates and fixes have been installed. There's a quick view of everything that's been installed to this computer, for example. So those are the acronyms here for some of the items in that window. And you'll notice as we go through a lot of repetition here, policy, program, product. This is division. And if you do have any questions about that, you can always reach out to us. So Reports menu, we just looked at that and saw where we can run reports from there. In many, many cases, though, you can right-click on a specific selection and see what reporting options are available for that selection. You can right-click on the window itself and then from another report. So let's have a look at a couple of those. If I wanted to run a report specifically on Adam's lab, rather than selecting it as I did before up here, and dragging that division name in, I can right click right on the selection and see all the reports that are available that can be run on that division. And all that happens if I make a selection here is you just see it pre-populates with the selection. I can make a multi-select and do the same. Also, you can right click on the window itself. This is similar to just the broader selection. If you go into here and make a selection here, except it is narrowing it down to those reports that can be run on the data in that window. And then you might do some additional configuration from there. But again, if there is a certain set of computers that I wanted to run, I can select, directly select the computers and see what reports are available for those. And then the result of a prior report can also be used to run reports. So if I actually run an audit report product by, let's say product by division, and this is an audit report, so we don't have to worry about date ranges. And I'm going to run that just on this one lab. Now, if I wanted to further drill down using just the products and computers in this lab, I can make my selection. I'm going to collapse all. So I wanted to say, okay, these are the products installed in this lab. I just want to look at usage overall for these products. I can right click and use this as my selection. So the output of one report can be used as the starting point for another report. And some of the other things that we talked about, flipping the view. Let's run that one really quickly one more time. So right now we're looking at a view of the product, and then under each product is the division, and then we're also seeing the computers in each division that contain that product. Well, I can right click up top here and reverse the view of this and see the division name. In this case, I ran it on all the divisions, so I can actually break this down to see all the products in that division and then all the computers within that division that have that individual product installed. We right click in many of these reports right in the column headers up here. So if I do it up top here, you don't see the option. But if I right click in the column header area, we get this option to customize the columns or remove a column. And from here, let's say I wanted to actually see installation counts. I can add that, and I can also rearrange these as necessary. Click OK, and I've got my count details for installation of each product. We can see, and then sort by that, and I can see key verify, key checkout, and Windows 7 Enterprise, of course, IBM Endpoint Manager. These are the most commonly installed on the computers in this report. And that can be done after the report has been run. So now let's just take a quick look at report parameters and time sets. I had mentioned, again, we're going to look at an audit report. And we're going to go into this setup window for the report and just quickly walk through. This is where you can actually set up a report to run on a schedule here. So you can do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or yearly. Set this up as a template that will automatically run that report in the future. You can add notes. You can use time sets to restrict the report to a specific period of time. So in addition to setting your date range, which is not applicable for an audit report, time periods aren't really going to be applicable as well for this particular report. But if you wanted to see usage statistics over the last quarter between 8 and 5 on the weekdays, you would just need to come under Window to Time Sets here. And then you could set up a time set, just right click and select New Time Set. And you can call it business hours or however you want to name that. and then you could add your time period here and just select Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 or however you wanted to manage it. And then you could make that a part of your report by dragging that or selecting that time set for any report where that is relevant. As I said, an audit report, timeframes are not considered. So the target often is a division, but just depending on what type of report it is, you can drag and drop into this target location, or this is the field that will often autofill if you make your selection and right click, bring that in based on a selection. You can also customize the columns prior to running the report. So you can see count details is the one we added. These additional columns are higher level. So you can see we're looking at an audit product by division, and these are going to give us more information about the product as opposed to more information about the computer. But these have to be done prior to running the report. You add these here, and then when we run this report, they will be included. So you see the publisher when it was released and the folder that it might be in the products window where that product might be. Once you've got a report and say you want to export and share this, it's as simple as right-clicking and selecting Save As. Most commonly, users will select text document, and that's the default selection because a text document is tab delimited. It can be opened in Excel, opened in other programs, and easily accessible from there. You can also save as an HTML, which actually they look pretty good. They're fairly presentable when you save it as an HTML document. It displays it very similarly to the way these reports will display in Key Reporter, which we will look at. So if you don't want to do any additional importing and work on the data once it comes out, if you just want to be able to present it to someone in a viewable format, HTML works very well. I haven't tried XML. I hear this is an Excel specific or an XML format that will open well and works well with Excel. And then the last option is Key Configure document. So if you're sending this report over to someone that has Key Configure installed, then this is typically going to be the best option for them to be able to open it. Often when we ask for reports in our support department and we're trying to investigate what might be going on, we certainly will ask for the Key Configure version of that report. So you just make your selection, name it, and save it, and then of course it will save to whatever location you've selected. And I did just want to mention that we actually have a number of ways that you can link or export data in addition to saving a report like this. We have ODBC connectors and many other possibilities. I think REST API, I think there is a JDBC and a number of other options. So if at any point you have questions about ways that you might be able to either import or link KeyServer data up to another database or another system that you've already got for software or hardware management, always feel free to reach out to us, and we probably have a way to make that work for you. Okay, so we'll just jump back in here briefly and move on to the next slide. So let's look at a couple of these hardware reports. We talked about the hot fixes. We did run that one. A very popular one within Key Configure is the histogram logins report. Under logins, some common ones are under login as logins and operating system percent, OS percent. So if you would like to grab a screen capture or take some notes as I display these slides, these are the reports that in the time that I have been here seem to be the most useful and most common on the hardware side of things. I'm not going to take the time to run each one of them, but you can see where to find them in that reports menu. Under audit is where you find hot fixes. Under chart is histogram logins. We will go ahead and run that one. Under login, we've got logins and OS percent. And under miscellaneous, very useful, again, often in support, but just to run the event dump every once in a while and get a view of the raw data that KeyServer is taking in from the computers out on the network is pretty insightful. So I'll go ahead and run that one. The hardware report, missing clients report is based on LDAP or AD. It can actually find computers that are on the network that are part of Active Directory but do not have the client installed. You can find duplicate MAC addresses, duplicate names, duplicate serial numbers. So these are useful hardware reports that I have seen come up. And let's just take a quick look at the histogram logins and the event dump just to get an idea of what those look like. So under reports, we can go to chart and histogram logins. Typically, we do this by division. It's mostly going to be useful for labs. And I'm going to run this on, let's say, last week. And we will just run this on all of the labs we have here. So I make that selection and drag those over. And then run this on last week. One thing to keep in mind if you're looking at usage reports is you want to make sure that you set a time frame when you go into these. The default is often to use the entire data set. And of course, then you're going back to the beginning of the KeyServer or all the data that's been stored, and it can take a very long time. So anything usage related, you want to make sure that you restrict the time set to what you're looking for. And so Adams Lab 1, what we can see from this very quickly, this is last week's usage. We've got 70 something computers in this lab, and we're maxing out at about 23, 22 at any given time in use. So this is a good report to tell me we really do not need, based on last week alone, we may not need this many reports now, or this computers in this room. Now we'd want to run this on a longer time period, maybe even going back a year or so to determine whether there are peaks that rise higher than this. But for that time period of last week, out of the 75 computers, we're maxing out at just 25 is the peak logins. And then we can look at Adams Lab 2. So that's what that looks like, and we could, of course, select a longer time period. Very useful, in particular, with labs or classrooms if you're trying to do some assessment of hardware needs prior to a refresh. We're going to close that one. And then I wanted to have a quick look at the event dump. So again, this is under miscellaneous, and it's called event dump. And we're just going to take a very quick look at this one. I'm going to just restrict it to today, and we'll run that on just today. And so we're going to look at all of the data that has come into this KeyServer since 12 a.m. this morning. And this is a demo KeyServer with a simulator running these events, but you could see the level of detail that's going on here. Each launch, if there is a policy associated, then you see the license start, you see the launch of the product, you see the quit of the product, and this is a good way to track things down. Each of these columns is sortable, so this is often useful when you are trying to hunt down a problem or determine something that is sort of strange behavior. You can usually track down a lot of information from these reports. This is another one that we will often ask for in support if we're trying to track down a problem for you. And we'll jump back out here. I think that's everything for hardware. Software reports. So let's just talk quickly about audit versus usage. I have talked about that a little bit. An audit is not dependent on any specific time frame. This is just in the last audit on each computer, what programs or products were discovered. So this is going to give you information about installations. It will apply across the board. You don't have to have policies in place for audit reports. They will also tell you the first time a product or program was discovered and the last time it was used. So you won't get any other ongoing usage data for launching and quitting, but you will be able to see when it was discovered and the last time that it was used in the audit report. Usage reports are policy dependent. So you do need to have a policy in place in order for usage reports to give you usage. And then you're also going to see the amount of time, the number of launches, and you can also get user information or run those reports based on users to see who's using the software and how much. Policy versus product versus program. Again, coming back to the idea of reports, you can run reports with the policy as your starting point, which is typically the best way to track it if you're looking at compliance or basing it on your entitlements. There is a difference between the way policy reports and product reports track usage of the data. With a policy report, you're going to get one instance of that software being used, even if there's multiple components to that software. Whereas with a product report, each component is tracked separately. And what I mean by that is if a user has Adobe Creative Cloud and you have a policy tracking usage for Creative Cloud, and a user launches Photoshop and then they launch Illustrator or another Creative Cloud product, the policy report is going to treat usage of all of those different components as one use of the software. So it will count it as launching it, tracking the usage, and ending it when everything has been closed. A product report is going to consider the use of Adobe Creative Cloud twice for the one launch of Photoshop and the one launch of Illustrator, and track usage separately. So if you do run reports and see some differences in the amount of usage, that is often the reason. If you're using multiple components of an individual product, your product reports are going to track the usage of the product separately for each component, and your policy report is going to aggregate it all into one. And then, of course, the program usage report is at the specific program level. So if you want to see, rather than Microsoft Office, if you want to drill down and see how much Excel usage you have, that's where we have the program reports that will give you that data. A couple of reports that are useful: product optimizations. Product optimizations, I'm not going to run it, but what that does is it will look at usage and compare that to your entitlement and tell you if there is a less expensive version of a product that you could install based on usage of the product. So a couple of examples. If you've got a computer that has Adobe Creative Cloud installed and a user has only ever used Acrobat, then you'll see that show up in the report as a suggestion. For this computer or for these computers which have only ever run Acrobat, you might consider just installing and purchasing Acrobat for those users or computers. And that is under Audit, the Audit menu. If you have denial policies in place, then the denial reports will show you how many times and what users and on which computers a product was denied launch. Under miscellaneous, we have product suggestions. Product suggestions is great if you've got an older KeyServer that has a lot of manually created products in it, and your goal is to swap those out for standard product definitions. The product suggestions report will tell you which standard definitions overlap with your manually created definitions. And we do recommend stepping through that process and swapping them out. There are a number of benefits to working with the standard product definitions. Probably the most important one being that you will have better product identification when you want to figure out where this product is installed. If you're using the standard definitions, you're going to have better luck. But also usage tracking is going to be more accurate, and a number of other items are going to be easier. Product upgrades are going to be easier to discover. There's an upgrade discoveries report is listed here, and that does exactly that. If you're using standard definitions and there are newer versions of a product installed on the computers on your network of a product that you're already tracking, you've got a policy for Office 2016 and Office 2018 or 2019 comes out, you're going to see that product in this upgrade discovery report, and that will tip you off that you need to add that to your Office policy perhaps. Unmanaged products is typically the place we go when we're just getting started. It's also useful to run now and again just to look for products that are installed, that are out there on your network that you don't have any policies tracking usage for. purchase. Under the purchase menu, there is a compliance report. We will go ahead and have a quick look at that here in Key Configure, and then we'll also have a look at that in Key Reporter very quickly. And then summarize is useful if you're trying to track down peak usage. It's a very quick report you can run on specific products for peak usage. Okay, so let's have a quick look at a couple of these. We'll have a look at unmanaged. Well, I've run unmanaged products a number of times in the other webinars. I will go ahead and run it now just to give a quick view. That is under audit, unmanaged products down here. And if we just run that, that's not time sensitive. And so here we can see and sort by the number discovered. We can see how many of these products have been discovered out on the network, and none of these are currently being managed with software policies. We'll close that one. We've got under here, we've got our denial reports. If there are any denial policies, it looks like we've got one. The red icon there in this KeyServer indicates that's a deny policy. I'm not going to run any of those at the moment, but I did want to run this compliance report. So we look at purchase-based reports. Now you do need to be using purchases and enter your entitlement data and your dollar amounts in order to run something like this. But this is a pretty useful report. Product by computer, we can look at compliance, and I'm going to go ahead and restrict this to this year, and we'll run that. I imagine this one might take a little time, but while that runs, we will move on to the next slide and talk about some of the things that we're going to be able to see in Key Reporter. Let that report run and we'll come back to it. So again, Key Reporter has the ability to run all the reports that are in Key Configure, but in addition to that, we have the dashboards with the widgets and the different options available there. And there's this one widget in particular that gives you very quick access to a pre-configured report that's set to run on a schedule called Quick Link. So I wanted to demonstrate that. Then we'll have a look at the report builder and look at the differences in the way that you build and configure your reports in Key Reporter compared to the way this is done in Key Configure, templates, and the schedule. And then we'll have a quick look at where to access the archive and search options. And it looks like the report is finished here. So what we're seeing if we collapse this down is we're seeing the different products that we have policies for, as well as purchase information. And this is giving us some details based on consumption of these policies, of where we have overspend or surplus information. And let's just drag these over a little to get all the information in here. So a good example is Creative Cloud 2015. According to this, there is a deficit of 50. We're entitled to 150 copies. We're managing 150, but we have consumed 200. So this is telling us that we have a $9,000 liability based on our unit price that we've paid for that product. Now that said, when you compare usage, so not just looking at the installation count, but usage statistics, it looks like we could actually remove that from all 200 computers, and that's going to save us the money. So we've got it installed in 50 locations more than we are entitled to, but we're actually not using it anywhere. Nobody's opening up any of that software and using it. So you might reverse the situation in some of these. So very useful. You do need to take the step of adding your entitlement and purchase information into the KeyServer in order to get useful data out of this report. But this is very good if you're looking into license optimization and trying to dig deeper into consumption versus entitlements. All right, so I'm going to bring up our web reports. So looking at the very same KeyServer, you see the availability maps here for the same labs. Some of the widgets in place here are just set up previously. We could see computer utilization statistics. I've talked about Key Reporter in the past and the way that these widgets are intended to be graphical representations of the data for sharing perhaps with other departments or end users. It's using the same data though and giving you the graphical view in these cases. The one widget that I did want to demonstrate very quickly here is this quick link. So under the report tag, we go to quick link and we can add that one. Currently no data because we haven't configured it. If we then come in and look at one of these templates that have been previously set up to run on a schedule, we can, let's say, grab login peaks and apply that. And now this gives us a very quick way to access that report. So I can click the view button and it will run the report if necessary and give us a view of that report. That's the idea. So here's our login peaks division report. Same one that we can run in Key Configure. We can also set it up to run here in the builder, but we can make it very easily accessible to end users who maybe don't know the details of how to run reports. If it's something that you just want them to have quick access to, you can add that to a dashboard for them. So we will have a quick look at the builder. This is the way you access the reports is a little bit different. So even though it's the same list of reports that runs in Key Configure, accessing it is through sort of this drill down selection option instead of the drop down menus. So here we're seeing the audit reports. If I select that, we can say, okay, we want to do audit of products on individual computers or divisions, select the divisions, and there we've got our acronym names, product by division or division by product. Often, if you know what you're looking for, it's easier just to go into the builder and select all, and you can see the complete list of all of the reports as they are displayed in Key Configure. But if you are not quite sure, the idea behind this was actually to solve that question of what does each report mean and how do I know what I'm doing. You go to this builder and you can say, well, I want to do an audit of programs on computers, computer by program or program by computer, and we can run that. Other options within this, you can run it as a particular account if you're signed in as an administrator and there are other accounts with reporting privileges. You can see what that end user would see as an administrator. You can save it to a folder if you've created folders in your reports window. Have a date range, you can select your date range, and you can also use reports on tags. I meant to talk about tags previously as an alternative to running reports. I will briefly show that to you when we wrap up here. I'm gonna go ahead and run this just to show you how this displays. So this is an HTML view, obviously, of the data that would normally come out of a report in Key Configure in that table format. This is what, if you save a report in Key Configure as HTML, it will come out and it looks very similar to this. Unlike Key Configure, we don't have the ability in Key Reporter to use the result of a report as the starting point for a new one. So that's something that's only an option in Key Configure, but we do have the ability to run a report and get a view of that report here using the report builder. And then the archive, what's called an archive here in Key Reporter, which gives us a list of all the reports that have been previously run, is in the reports menu in Key Reporter. So if I come under window, down at the very bottom, there's this reports option, and this is the equivalent of that archive page in Key Reporter. And this is where your folders are if you wanted to move and organize your reports into folders, and you can see the folder column here as well, showing you what folder each report has been run in. The last thing I wanted to do, because I skipped it before, was just demonstrate how you can use tags as an alternative to reports. If we come to the computers window and scroll way down, we can see this is where we can add tags, or what are called value tags. A value tag is when you have this nested layer. But basically what I wanted to show is that it's within the window here. So we're not running a report, But if you assign tags to a set of computers or policies or products, you can then drill down to the products or components that have that tag assigned. You can also use tags in your reports as a way to drill down. You can nest tags the way we're seeing here by, if we go into a computer, I'll show you how that would look. So you could do a nested tag using a period in the tag field. So let's say we wanted to do computers that are Apple, and a period will create the nested tag. So Apple OS 10. By setting it up with that period, you're going to get a nested tag the way they are shown here. And a value tag is similar to that, but it's done with a colon. And so you just put a colon between the two. And once that got saved, it would do it there. I'm not going to save that on this computer, but that is how that is added. You can also use JavaScript to add those in bulk. So we have a JavaScript that will allow you to make a selection of computers or products or policies and then run a script that will add tags to that selected group based on up here in the tasks menu. You would run it from up here for tags, add tags or remove tags based on your selection. That is all I have for the discussion today. Thanks everybody for joining today.